Hello, welcome back to Gals on the Pit Wall. I am your host, Catherine, and welcome back to not the usual place. I'm actually at home studying for my uni exams right now. This is my mum's dressing room slash office. She may burst in at any moment, because I don't think she knows that I'm recording this. So if she appears, maybe you'll get a little Lynn feature this week. Yeah, it's exam season. I'm stressing. I don't know if I look stressed, but I feel stressed. Okay. This is my new Lando Norris jersey, by the way. I bought this for going to Zandvoort. Shall I just... I'll stand up for the video. I don't even know if this is in shot now. But I'll do a little dance. Ooh, I wonder if I can see Lynn's car. Oh, it might be Lynn pulling up on the drive. Yeah. This is going to be difficult being sat by a window because my ADHD is going to immediately want to stare out the window. So we're going to try our best. So before we talk about the Japanese Grand Prix that we've just had and that race weekend, I'm going to talk a little bit about news because I feel like we don't have time to bring in the news anymore. Say we, I mean I. I just kind of forget. So I think this is quite an interesting topic. Makeup brands coming into motorsport as sponsors. So Elf are now a sponsor in IndyCar, and obviously recently Charlotte Tilbury became a sponsor in F1 Academy. And this has sparked a lot of debate. I mean, I think everything in motorsport sparks debate, but particularly things that are seen as regarding women. You know, typical. And as this is Gals in the Pit Wall, I thought this was a good topic. So, makeup brands joining motorsport, I think it's much needed. Because when you look at the sponsors at the moment, they're just not very appealing to women. And you might go, oh, but you don't watch the sport for the sponsors. That's not what the thing about watching the sport is. And I hear you. However, it's about women feeling seen within the sport. I am looking at my notes, okay, because my brain is frazzled. Having sponsors that are more appealing to women reinforces that women and racing can coexist. Having one doesn't cancel out the other. Like racing and femininity, they can come hand in hand, okay? I'd say the only unfortunate thing is that Elf, as a brand, I believe, has some ties with what is happening in Palestine. Some not so great ties. And I think that ruins it a little bit. And that's the same with a lot of makeup brands right now. And just a lot of brands. So maybe this is my gentle encouragement to research the brands that you like and see what they're up to. Not just with that, but just ethically in general. Just maybe have a look. There's so many great websites that can tell you things. And also tell you like really good alternatives to the things that you like. So there you go, a little extra message on the podcast this week. And I do think that it is important to have brands. Like the power of brands in motorsport is huge, and therefore I think it is important to have brands that are more appealing to women. And I thought of, oh my god, so me and my mum, we've been talking a lot about branding. My mum has never watched F1. She's not got much of an interest, but she's really interested in the marketing side of things, especially how that's evolved. So like obviously cigarette brands used to be a massive sponsor and now that's not allowed. And we were talking about this the other day. And we found out that Durex, which is like a condom, safe sex kind of brand, used to sponsor or used to be a sponsor in F1. And it basically stopped because the BBC, when they were broadcasting the races in the UK, refused to show it while Durex were a sponsor because, you know, I think my mum said this was back in like the 70s. Might need to fact check that. But obviously this was very taboo then. So, you know, they took it off. There was no longer a sponsor. But I think that's so funny because the irony of like promoting safe sex while doing something really unsafe, I think is such good marketing. But then that led me to my train of thought about brands that are more related to women that could sponsor in F1 now. And that made me think of period product brands. And I'll tell you my train of thought. And obviously period product brands and period products are not just for women. They're for anyone who needs period products. But I would say that like they're often associated with women. So I think that this would be hilarious because when you think about all the old period adverts, they're like improving slightly now, but there always used to be ridiculous things like you're at a festival on someone's shoulders with your period, and like it's to show how good the product's absorbency is because like whoa, you can go on someone's shoulders in your period, whoa, and like stupid shit like rollerblading. I remember used to be like a thing, and like sports and like yeah, and it's like all right, okay, calm down. But I just think that like they're now trying to move away from that because obviously people were like that's just not, we don't need that, we just need to know it works because the last thing you really want to do when you're on your period is go to a festival and be on someone's shoulders anyway. So I've decided that I think they really need to lean into the old adverts and like, oh look, you can go racing on your period. Like, you can just really extreme sport. Wow, and I just think that'd be fun. Maybe that's total waffle. Maybe you're like, what is she on about? But like, please see my vision here. And if any period product companies are listening to this and they use that idea, then please pay me for my genius. Duh. So there you go. That's my 2 cents on that. Really, not much else happening in the world of F1 right now. I feel it's the calm before the storm. Obviously, we've had a lot of news and drama and happenings and things coming out recently. So to have this kind of quiet patch has been relaxing because now, like, we can just sort of process that. Was the like the stuff that the Christian Horner stuff resolved? Not really, but we could all do with a period of calm just now because we know the shit's coming. Yeah, so it's been pretty calm at the moment. No urgent news to report, other than like the Daniel Ricciardo situation as it evolves. I can't remember if I said this before, but apparently he's got an ultimatum that he had 5 races, I think, to basically show that he is going to, be allowed to stay at Red Bull, or RB even, sorry, and have a shot at the seat at Red Bull. So this is the same as what Nick DeVries had last season. As we're coming to the end of that, do I think it's true? I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, obviously, because we've seen what's happened. But I also think that I'm not saying he won't be out before the end of the season because it could happen, but I also don't think the margin has been that big between him and Yuki that it warrants being like, get out now. I think that he's like, although he is not doing as well as Yuki, where he should be matching him or doing better with his experience, he is obviously a vital part of developing that car. So I think that he's still an important asset to them. But you know my thoughts that I would rather see Liam Lawson or a younger driver in there. I think Daniel he's not going to win a championship anytime soon. I think unfortunately we're past that. He is obviously one of the older drivers on the grid, and there is so much new talent coming. And I think that he now maybe needs to take a role in developing the car while not being on track, even as a test driver, which obviously he doesn't want to do. But I think that maybe his worth is there now, or in another team that could use his expertise. So like Williams are obviously struggling, or Alpine even. I think that he wants a seat, and I think if he was offered from another team for enough money, he would take it. Because when he was out of F1 before, he was offered. You can hear my dog coming in. He was offered a seat, I think in Haas and other teams for it, and he didn't take it because not enough money, or he was too proud to go there, or whatever. But I think that might be what happens now. I think I don't think he's a lot of options. I really don't think he's in contention for the Red Bull seat. I think realistically, the contenders for the Red Bull seat are Checo again, which is not a bad shout for them. I mean, P2 this past weekend, great. They've had 3 1-2s out of the 4 races. Obviously, Ferrari had the other one. Carlos. Oh my god. Don't just slam that door any louder. Carlos is obviously, who I'd like to see there. Not biased at all, but I still think that he is a good option for them, as I've been saying for like the last year. Yuki really should get a shot at it. I don't know why they're not considering him. Maybe just because he is still quite hot-headed. He's not quite matured as a driver. I mean, we saw that when he tried to take Daniel out in an outlap. So, I don't think that Daniel will be going there. But I don't think he's going to be out of RB quite yet. And like, it's sad to see someone not doing well. Even though he's not one of my favourite drivers, I don't necessarily want to see him out. Because it's quite sad. Yeah. Even though I'm smiling. I'm just smiling because, yeah. But it is quite calm other than that. But yeah, we know it's going to kick off in the next, the rest of the season. It's the next couple of months, but just the rest of the season there, really. Yeah. So I'm hoping my phone's charged enough to go into the racing. Again, Japan, because of where it is in the world. For me, it was ridiculous time for the day that the practice was on. So, no practice. I was going to wake up and watch the second one, because I think that was at like 7 a.m. And bless, my mum did try and come in and wake me up. And I was just not having it. So, didn't watch the practices. Have I fallen off? No. Because last year I could do it in the summer. And in the summer I'll try and get... Well, no, because it's all regionalised now. So So I don't think I'll actually have to be able to do the practice at any point. Anyway, qualifying. I was awake for that. I was awake in enough time. That was at a decent time of day. Qualifying was at like a normal hour in the morning to be awake, and it worked quite well because it means I can get up and revise. I haven't gone through these notes. These could be gibberish. I think that's my one downfall as well. When these races are early, they're actually before when I would take my first ADHD med of the day. I normally take my first one at 8 in the morning. So it was alright for qualifying, but for the race and stuff, it's before, and you'll see that that poses some difficulties. But my brain's not quite engaged in the morning, so my notes are a bit mental. The teams this weekend that struggled, Mercedes, who looked like they were going to be fine and then weren't, Alpine again, and Williams. So Williams, as we remember from the last race, only had one spare chassis. They gave it to Alex. They took Logan out. Very big debate. Yeah, you know my feelings if you listened last week. If not, go back and listen. So coming into this race, they couldn't really afford any mistakes because they had fixed Alex's car, but they'd given that car to Logan because it was going to be too much work to change cars back. Fine, whatever. But they're running without spare chassis at the moment. Apparently they aren't the only team though, which is interesting because the chassis, if you don't know, is the most expensive thing to make and also takes the longest amount of time. So if you wreck a chassis, you're buggered. But you would think during the winter break they would have made a fair amount of spares. But Williams didn't. Anyway, so Q1. George barges in the pit lane, getting his elbows out. I think he barged in front of Oscar. So K-Mag sets the first lap. He sets 131.2. And then Max comes out and puts in a 128.8. So, yeah. Pretty clear of the rest, as expected. Oscar puts in a strong lap. I was kind of hoping that McLaren would have a good weekend here. Obviously, they did well in Suzuka last year. They got P2 and P3, double podium. But that was later in the season when they developed the car more. So, yeah. Still optimistic. Fernando goes P2 ahead of Perez in P3. Fernando was looking really good. He was looking really good on and off track. No, he was looking quick. We've got Yuki, the home race hero. He goes up into P8. Ahead of Charles, actually, who didn't have a great qualifying session. But Yuki went ahead of him despite having a wee slide on the track. So the back markers, interestingly, were going for 3 sets of soft tires in Q1 to try and get out of Q1, which obviously, yeah, because there was no one was going to use them in the race, so there wasn't much plan to use them in the race. It's a high deg track, so people were using them up in qualifying. But yeah, to use 3 sets in Q1, I guess you have to know in your strategy that there's such a slim chance of you even getting out of Q1, let alone getting out of Q2 into Q3, that it's worth using all 3. On Charles' last run, he managed to get up to P4. Logan was doing so well, and then Pierre Gasly knocked him out. Then Nico Hülkenberg knocked out Pierre Gasly, and then Ocon goes P10, Ricciardo goes P9. Yeah, Ricciardo's got to know that he's being heavily watched. They all do, because they so many contracts running out, but Ricciardo is being watched by the team and everyone. Bottas goes P8 and knocks out Stroll. That Cyber was looking decent this weekend, actually. Less tractory, slightly better. Maybe my prediction was... No, I'm not even going to say... When I predicted that they would do well, I'm probably still wrong, but maybe they'll do better. It's really their pit stops letting them down. Anyway. So out goes Stroll, Gasly, K-Mag, Logan and Zhou. Which, obviously contradicts the fact that the Cybers are doing good. Maybe Bottas was doing good in the Cyber. I think it's important to highlight. So Aston Martin had Fernando Alonso in Q1 up in P2, or he had himself up in P2, but he had the car in P2. So clearly that car has some pace over 1 lap at least, but in the race it does too. So why was Stroll out? What the hell went wrong there? He again had quite a tough weekend. We Lancelot. He obviously knows that he's not losing his seat because Daddy owns the team. So you would think that takes pressure off, but then is it the pressure that makes drivers perform well? But then he is under pressure because everyone calls him shit. So, yeah. I don't know what's going on there. I really don't. And I don't, everyone says he's a shit driver. And I just am not, I don't think he's the best, or even in the top, how many best, but I don't think he's shit. He has good weekends. So I'm not even saying that he deserves to lose his seat. But there are drivers that deserve to be in that seat, and he's just holding it up by his dad owning the team. It's such a conflicting position. And like, I quite like him, and his driver number is my favourite number. I just really want him to do well. Maybe I just love an underdog, but I'm really rooting for him. And I know it's a bit rich calling him an underdog considering his dad owns the team, but faith in Logan. No, faith in Les. But also faith in Logan. Oh, I can't. I'm Logan Sargent's biggest fan, by the way. I decided this at some point last season, and yeah, I think my mood state is very dependent on him doing well. So as you can tell, not doing great. Ocon getting out of Q1, he was so excited in that tractor, as he should be. The celebration on the radio was like if he had got pole. He was so excited. That was really that was just quite nice, really. Although it's sad because his car's shit, but it's really good. Q2, Checo Max first out in the track. I think that's quite unusual. Normally they're not the first ones out until about Q3, and then they tend to be like, yeah, Verstappen was only 12 milliseconds on his first run ahead of Checo. And they're obviously P1 and P2. Oh, shocker. Lando went fastest Sector 1, but still only went P3. So that just shows the difference in pace this weekend. There was actually a bit of a tussle at the start of Q2 between Oscar, Lando, and Fernando for P3. They were obviously quite close in pace. Mercedes had done so well in practice, and it was looking like it was going to be, quite okay for them this weekend, an improvement. And then they just didn't do well in qualifying. I think one of the practices was rained off. I think because it was one where I woke up and it was like Oscar had gone quickest, I think. And I was like, what the fuck? And then I realized it had been rained off. I was like, oh, okay. Never mind. Or it was a really wet session. So, hopes up. The heart attack you get, though, when you don't watch a session because you're asleep and then you wake up and obviously the first thing you do is, I need to check. And it's something like that. And you're like, what the fuck? Albon was still, with 6 minutes left in the session, hadn't come out of the garage. He'd obviously used all his sefs? He'd obviously used all his softs in Q1, which meant that he was going to have to do his one lap on used softs. So, quite a difficult mission. Obviously, you can't really do more than one lap on the used softs in qualifying. Nico Hülkenberg had a lap time delay for track limits. Ferraris were doing not great in comparison to the previous weekend. Charles was in P7, Carlos was in P5. I was suffering. Everyone from P8 downwards also did their first run in Q2 on their used softs. Or on one set of the used softs. So their lap times were just, it's about trying to survive that session and just trying to get as far as possible. They knew they weren't competing for front points on the grid. Front points? Front places? Front positions. Yep, that's the word. Oh yeah, and then Charles was in P7 and he wasn't come back out the garage because they'd obviously calculated that he was above kind of what the knockout time was going to be. But I literally felt sick. I don't always trust Ferrari's strategy, can't blame me, and I was literally I was dead set sure he was going to get knocked out. Obviously Charles as well this weekend had his tribute helmet to Jules Bianchi. It was 10 years since Jules passed away at track. So I think we were all rooting for a good weekend for Charles, really. And yeah, it did pick up a bit. He did really well. Yeah. So an important weekend for Charles. Yeah, Ocon just missed out on getting out of Q2. Daniel Ricciardo pushed out Nico Hülkenberg, and then Yuki knocked out Daniel. So that was stressful. The tension at RB, Drive to Survive are probably buzzing about this because they love Daniel Ricciardo and they love drama. So yeah, out Ricciardo, Hulk, Bottas, Albon, sad times, and Ocon. Yeah, Daniel's 4th time this season being out qualified by Yuki. But the gap, as I said way back at the start of this podcast, is getting smaller. At Q3, yeah. So Charles only had one new set of softs left, so he sat in the garage and decided to go for a one lap because that was really all he could do. Max obviously went quickest in his first lap, and then Checo was matching his pace more or less. Then Lando went quickest in Sector 1 again and was P2. That was quite exciting. He was 0.249 behind Max, so I was getting on the edge of my seat thinking, we're in for a close one here. Lando could go on pole. How exciting. How wrong was I? No, he still did good. But, Red Bulls were clear this weekend. Red Bulls were clear. Charles Jones track 6 minutes left, out of sync, but he did have the benefit of a clear track. I'm assuming that Ferrari had obviously worked out that the track wasn't going to evolve much more, so he was going to get a good shot at the fastest lap. If you don't know, as qualifying goes on, the track tends to get quicker because it's got more grip from everyone being on it. Depending on the time of day, temperatures change, things like that. So the track usually gets quicker as the session goes. Fernando and Lewis are both getting a bit, not angsty, just obviously questioning. Like, they thought they put really good laps together, but obviously weren't getting near the Red Bulls. And they were scratching their heads a bit. They weren't the only ones. I think Charles also said that he thought he did a really good lap, but he couldn't get closer than P7. So that was his worst start in Japan since his debut, where he also started P7. So that was a bit of a tough one. Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of confusion about where to find pace. Verstappen sets fastest sector 1, and then Carlos is down in his lap on sector 1 and 2. So that was his final fast lap. So my hope for Carlos was gone after a wonderful last race. So yeah, I cry. Perez goes P2. Max lost time in the final sector and still improved his pole time. How the fuck does that work? So yeah, phenomenal for Max. Just phenomenal, really. Once again. Yuki stays P10. That's alright though. Good start for him. Good chance at points. Fernando goes P5, and George lost time in the middle sector, which kind of screwed him over. So obviously top 3 we had Verstappen, Perez and Norris for the race. The race was starting at 6. So in my head, I was like, I'm going to try and wake up at 5, because that gives me a bit of time to wake up and kind of sit up and open my eyes, basically. And I was like, I'll put a wee snack in my bedside drawer, so when I wake up and I'm hungry, I can have a wee banana and a wee cereal bar and get going. Because considering for Australia, I managed to wake up at 3:30am, made a full breakfast and got into bed with it to watch the race. I don't know what happened here. I woke up at 6:36am. Obviously, when I woke up, I looked at the time and went, fuck, I've missed half the race. Very panically put it on. And as I was putting it on, the lights were going out and the race was starting. So then I was like, oh my god, was the race not even at 6? Am I like on the replay now? Like, what's happened? Very confused. And then I looked at the bottom of the standings and Ricciardo and Albon were out. And I was like, oh shit, they've obviously crashed. So, as it transpires, they've crashed in lap 1. So if I had woken up at 5:30 for 6 o'clock to watch one lap, then have to sit for almost 40 minutes because of a red flag, I would have been raging. So I actually think that I statistically slept in because I'm a genius. Take that how you will. So I did watch the replay to get that lap 1 instant. So yeah, Albon and Ricciardo crash. So they yellow flagged it and then they red flagged it. It was it was pretty hefty. Obviously it took a lot of time to prepare? It took a lot of time to repair the barrier. It was the tiniest bit of contact though at the start of the race. I think Albon tapped the back of Ricciardo and spun him, and they sort of hit each other and were in the wall. And Albon says that Ricciardo gave him no space. I would say that it was more Albon than Ricciardo at fault, but really it was a racing incident. So, but you know what you're gonna do. You're gonna hop on the radio. Yeah. Basically, Albon was on the inside of Ricciardo, and Ricciardo had another car, which I think was Stroll, but I could be wrong. He had another car on the outside of him, so he had nowhere to go. And then he got pushed towards Albon, and Albon tapped him. So lap 4 restart. So that was fine. That was the moment that I woke up. And then Ocon reports that Pierre had hit him at the restart, but car was okay, so all good. And don't know what happened to Hulkenberg. Horrible restart for him. He lost like 5 places or something. Somewhere between 5 and 7 places, but a lot of places at the start. So from the restart, Max is obviously pulling away in P1. Perez is actually really close to him, as he should be in equal machinery, and is chasing him down. I was getting a bit excited, thinking, a good battle if Checo can stay on him. And then he went off the track mid-corner, so then had to switch from attacking Verstappen to defending against Norris in P3. So yeah, that was kind of it. And then Max pulled away again. As every race goes, once Max gets away, he's just in his own world. He does his own thing. We saw the Haas in lap 7, K-Mag, putting pressure on Pierre Gasly, even though the Alpine had DRS. And I think that really shows the power of the Ferrari engine that Haas used versus the Renault engine of the Alpine, which is obviously the tractor of the season so far. Haas are actually doing really well. good weekend for them. I know we all loved Gunther, right? But the change in fortune for that team so far since not having Gunther as team principal and just the slight improvements we're seeing in different areas, clearly it was the right choice. Well, touch wood, because I don't want to ruin it for them. But yeah, looking good. Valtteri went in for a stop. It was an 8-second stop. That was shit, but it was better than like 40 seconds or whatever it was the other week. To save time, people will put under a red flag to obviously change the tyres. So some people did that. But yeah, Valtteri went in on lap 8. Nope, on lap 7 and had that horrible 8-second stop. George Russell was reporting steering issues. So I don't know if that's to explain part or maybe a part explanation of what was going on with Mercedes. Don't know. Logan was up in P13. That was quite exciting. Lando's tyres were struggling. Carlos was gaining on him for that P3 spot. Lando pitted, going for that undercut, which I think it was effective in the end. And then I think Joe goes in and has a 5.4 second stop. So again, better, but quite far off the kind of 2-second mark that you would aim for. Around lap 13, Lewis Hamilton is on the radio and he asks if he should let George by because George is behind him. Very peculiar that you would offer to swap with your teammate in a race. Just isn't really something that happens. You're normally told to swap, you get team orders. But no, Lewis volunteered. I don't know if that's reflective of just where he is at with this car. He did walk out of the press conference though after being asked about Ferrari, which I think is odd because like you are moving to Ferrari and that is like news and obviously people are going to ask you that. But anyway, he lets George by. So yeah, clearly knowing he wasn't going to do too much with that car and was happy to let him by. But that's really early in the race to do that too. Joe retires lap 14 with a gearbox problem. So yeah, even though Sauber are doing slightly better, not great. Also, speaking of like the Ferrari engine versus the Renault engine in the house and the Alpine, Sauber also have a Ferrari engine, and Bottas, who was having a great wee drive, got a really good overtake done on the Alpine. So yeah, showing that difference in the engines. At this point, everyone in the top had kind of pitted, except Charles, which was stressing me out. So Charles was actually out in P1, having a jolly old time, while everyone else had pitted, so they were hunting him down again on his very old tyres. Lewis was reporting issues with his tyres on like lap 19. He was on hard, so that was quite early. And then yeah, obviously he was getting overtaken. Sainz got him as well. The Mercs were going for one stops, and they ultimately didn't do it. They made quite a late call to go for a 2-stop, which kind of worked because by the time they made that call, the top 10 were so far apart from the bottom 10, and even Yuki, who was in P10, was about 40 seconds behind like P9. So both Lewis and George boxing, they were still guaranteed points, but it did kind of ruin their race making that late call. Obviously they didn't make the call, but making that late call to go for a 2-stop. It was like lap 40 something they did that. Lap 21, Max has reclaimed the lead off Charles. Charles is going so strong though. He was on mediums from the start because he was going for this 1-stop, and he was getting these mediums go a hell of a long time. Charles Leclerc, the tyre whisperer, yes, he just needed to basically drag that as long as possible to get on the hards and do the 1-stop, and doing that successfully, which he did, and he got driver of the day for that. Deserved. Really good for him. Charles being able to do that on the tyres ultimately got him P4. If he hadn't done that, I think he would have been like P8 or 9 because having that second stop and the time that would have been lost. So yeah, really, really good from him. Shame he missed out on the podium. But great that he had driver of the day. Lap 23, Ocon's engineer tells him he needs to push. Ocon gets quite frustrated, which is understandable because he just done his fastest lap of the race. So clearly already pushing. There was a bit of chaos also in the pit lane because I think 5 or 6 of the kind of cars in the bottom half of the grid all kind of wanted to pit at the same time, and because they had some slow stops that made it more congested. Bottas almost had an unsafe release into K-Mag, very narrow missed, so got away with it. And wee Yuki, who's having a great race, is on his radio complimenting his engineers for a great stop. We love to see it. So at this point, Max is out in P1. Charles is still in P2, holding on this 1-stop, but Perez is closing in on him. Charles was really like doing some good like defense and really, yeah, having a strong race despite the 1-stop. You think he would have been suffering on those tires, and he obviously was a bit, but he did quite a good wee job. Checo obviously did get him in the end. Charles has managed to keep Checo behind him for quite a long time until obviously with the low grip, Charles ran off track and Perez got him. And Lando was right behind him too, so Charles was a bit of a sitting duck at that point. So it was quite clear he was going to box because, yeah. So his one and only stop happened. Him and Lando both actually boxed. And because Lando's trying to cover the threat from George Russell behind him. And Charles came out ahead of Lando and ahead of George Russell. Fortunately, Lando came out behind George. Just because of being a couple of tenths slower on the stop. George was looking like he was going to make his one stop work. And then Lando got George in a really good overtake for P7. Really caught George at napping, I'd say. It'll be interesting to see who the overtake of the month nominations are, because I do think the Lando will be in there. He was having a great drive. Oscar was in front of Charles at this point, so we were thinking maybe Oscar was going to try and hold Charles up so Lando could get him. Because obviously Oscar's race here was not with them. But, no. Valtteri Boss, as I said, was having a really good drive. Him and K-Mac had a great bat for P13. I think, especially for obviously Valtteri in that race because Joe was out, but the Cybers would be doing so much better if they weren't messing up these pit stops. Like, obviously it was great to see that battle, but it wouldn't have been happening if Bottas hadn't been in the pits for 8 seconds in his stop. He would have been much further forward. He could have really been in the fight for points. So that must be really frustrating for them. It's really frustrating to watch because you're like, oh my god, you shouldn't be getting this wrong at this point. You really shouldn't be getting this wrong. George also reports that his helmet is flying off his head. So he pitted, obviously for fresh tires eventually for his first stop. Or first stop during the race. When I say first stop, I don't mean that they didn't pit during the red flag. I just mean the first stop during the race. But his helmet seems to be fine at that point because I didn't really see them check it. But yeah, he was saying his helmet was coming off his head, which must be terrifying. Perez managed to get Lando with DRS about lap 35. Sainz? Oh my god. Sainz is still the last front runner to pit at this point for a second stop around lap 35. Max, after his pit, comes out ahead of Charles, who was in P2. Yeah. Carlos also asked to box around this point, and he was told to stay out. But he was really going to need to because he was suffering. And then I think he went in the next lap. Yeah, because he ran wide, obviously with no grip. I think he ran wide turns 16 and 17. So he did get called in eventually. And he came out in P7 behind the marks. But obviously the fresher tyres were going to mean that he was going to get past them fairly easily. So by lap 36, we've got Oscar hunting down Fernando and Carlos hunting down Hamilton. Carlos needs to pass them. Carlos gets past Lewis. George finally boxes for mediums for the rest of his race. Comes out behind Oscar and Fernando. To keep George behind him, Fernando used our favourite little F1 trick where he was coming off the throttle to give Oscar DRS to keep George away from him. So that worked. And that went for quite a few laps. Lewis boxed in lap 40 for medium. So that was the end of the one stop mission. Still the right choice though, because I think ultimately if they had stopped with a one stop, it would have been much worse off. I really Charles was in P3 and I really, really wanted him to hold on to this. Obviously, important weekend for him. But Carlos obviously was on the fresh charge with a 2-stop race that Brett executed well. They actually, for running 2 completely different strategies, both were executed really well. I did find out after that they weren't going to do a 1-stop for Charles, which was plan C apparently. But Charles was like, no, we can make plan C work. We can do it. So actually, yeah, it was Charles's call. It's even better for driver of the day. As predicted, Lynn has come into the podcast. Yeah, Mum, how do you feel about Logan Sargent crashing in lap 42 of the Japanese Grand Prix? She has no thoughts. That's how I felt. No, just disappointed. I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. Logan went off track in lap 42. That was very disappointing. He was having a really good race. And yeah, that was, yeah. No safety car though. And actually, quite good news in that he managed to reverse it out of the barrier and drive around, and he pitted for fresh tyres, and he finished the race. He did finish bottom out of the cars he finished, but he wasn't out. So, don't know what the damage to that Williams is in terms of the chassis and things. Fingers crossed for them. It's not too bad because they are having a hooner recently. Lap 44, Carlos gets Lando down the main straight with the RS, so that puts him in P4. He's then hunting down Charleg in P3. But we knew it was going to happen because Carlos obviously had fresh tyres, Charles doing a 1-stop. So Charles had told the radio that his battle's not with Carlos and his battle's with Lando, so there'd be no team orders. There's a lot of debate online. The Charles and the Carlos fans seems to go at each other quite a lot, and they're like, "Oh, so when it's Charles who's out in front, there's no team orders. Oh, so Carlos is just allowed to pass him, huh? But when it's Carlos in front, Charles isn't allowed to pass him." And I was like, "Get a grip, okay?" Carlos had faster tyres. Charles was in a one-stop, and they'd made the right choice. Okay. Ending that debate now. Stroll's on soft tyres, and he's looking to gain on Yuki for P10. Obviously, was rooting for Stroll to have a good race, but equally wanted that home race point for Yuki more than anything in this entire race. That was more interesting to me than who was going to win, because we knew it was going to win, so all that mattered was that Yuki got points. Oh, so one of the highlights of this race actually was a radio message from Lance towards the end. You probably all heard it now, but when it came on, I couldn't tell if he was laughing or crying or screaming. I think he was just having like a major voice crack. But he was just complaining about how there was no speed down the straight, I think. But it was just, oh, it's such a good voice message. Voice message? Such a good radio message. If you haven't heard it, go look it up. It is quite something. I think we're all a bit baffled as to what went on there. And just hearing the whole commentary team being like, what was that? But yeah, Lance, because of his per qualifying, they put more downforce on his car to try and protect his tires so he could have longer, like, he could maximize his time on the tires basically. To try and get some overtaking done. Because obviously when you overtake, you're using a lot more throttle and a lot more pace, and that's going to use up your tires when you're attacking. If you want to preserve your tires, you can't attack. When you're starting for the back, you need to attack. So yeah, more downforce basically. Aerodynamics. And yeah, Oscar and George had a close battle. They actually looked like they almost came together, which is what I was talking earlier about, this sort of weird George having it out for Oscar in this race. Obviously, like, it wasn't deliberate, but it was, yeah, he was really going for him this weekend. George does get noted for forcing a driver off track. It was a racing incident, and no further action. Final lap, Lance, unfortunately, who had obviously been battling Yuki for that P10, and then wasn't going to make up enough time on his laps because he was about 8 seconds behind. Hulk then catched him for P11, so it just went real bad. This is when Fernando's still using his technique to keep George behind by using Oscar, but Oscar does go off track, and George got Oscar on the main straight. So a couple of last lap overtakes, which was exciting, but real sad for me and Oscar. You know how I feel. But points for Yuki, or as people have been referring to it, Yoints. Why have I never heard people calling it Yoints until this weekend? Is this a new thing, or am I just like out of the loop? So Yoints. That's what we're calling this podcast, Yoints. Charles driver of the day. Yeah, it was going to be between him and Yuki, but yeah, people were excited that Yuki got his points. Charles deserved something for that. And I hope that made him feel a little bit happier. He said in his post-race interview that it's much nicer, or it's really nice to, when you do a good race, that other people recognize that you've done a good race, because sometimes you feel like people don't notice it. But we noticed that. Ferrari did get their strategy really correct today. They did as much as they could. So I was chuffed as a Ferrari fan. So yeah, in 4 races, that is 4 1-2 finishes. So we've obviously had 3 Red Bull 1-2s and a Ferrari 1-2. China, I'm assuming it could be a Red Bull 1-2, but you know, who knows? Anything can happen, is what Australia taught us this season. But I think it's quite obvious that the 2 teams are dominating, which are the 2 teams, or 2 of the teams you would expect, Red Bull and Ferrari. Good to see Ferrari up there once again, though. And yeah, this was the first time I was really questioning. I was so sure that Red Bull would make the change from Perez, and now I'm like, yeah, I'm less sure now. But I don't know. We'll see. Still early days. But I could understand them keeping Checo. But it would be good to see someone else. And yeah, that was kind of it for the race. This has ended up being a really long podcast because I yapped a lot. So yeah, that's kind of it. This has ended up being really long because I've yapped a lot. The next race is China. It's also a sprint weekend, first one of the season. The sprint, though, is at like 3 in the morning in the UK. The race is, I think, at a more reasonable 8 or 9 on the Sunday. And also, it's our new sprint format. So now the qualifying is after the sprint. just because of Parc Ferme causing so many issues for people last season. Because obviously we had qualifying first, and then after qualifying goes into Parc Ferme, it means you're not allowed to make changes to your car. But if you go into the sprint and then you have a crash or a collision or just anything, then it means that if you are making changes to your car, you are starting from the pit lane, which, yeah, major issues there. So now it's changed. I think that's much better. And it means qualifying's on at a decent time. So if you're not someone who cares about watching the sprints, I actually quite like them. Then you can just wake up for qualifying at a normal time. But also, if you're waking up for sprint and then qualifying a few hours later, especially if you live in the UK, that's like a small window to go back to sleep. I know I'll achieve it, but we'll see. It's quite a difficult one. Exciting though. Zhou's home race. Good to see China back in the calendar. First Chinese driver to race the Chinese Grand Prix, I believe. So hopefully Cyber can make good pit stop calls, make them of a decent time, as in like 3 seconds or below would be quite good now. They are slowly getting better. If everything on the car could not break, no gearbox issues now, please have those fixed. And yeah, thanks for listening. I'm still figuring out the format on how I'm doing this. I think I'm going to change from the lap by lap. I'll still do it in lap order, I think, but maybe go for more highlights. It's hard doing this on your own. I don't know how people do podcasts by themselves because I'm not built for this. But we will keep trying. Keep trying. Yeah. So thank you for listening. It actually does mean a lot to me. Not to get emotional, only 4 races into the season. But obviously, as you can tell, going through a bit of a tough time at the moment. So when people are still listening and I still hear great things about the podcast, it's very reassuring that I'm doing okay. And yeah, I'll leave it on that. Thank you very much. Follow us on follow me on the Instagram for Gals in the Pit Wall. On TikTok there's Gals in the Pit Wall one, but I am thinking of transitioning that over onto just my one. Now it's just me, so there's at Kath Roos on TikTok. Yeah,